Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. JJ here, and I will explain to you why you should stop using AWS EC2 in deploying your web application, for example a React web app, in your project. So using AWS EC2 to host your web application, first is it is hard to maintain as you need to install other tools such as if it's a React app, you need nodejs, yarn, or npm, and also it is expensive as their free tier might not be enough to host your application, especially if you will use Docker. So the question is, if we will not use AWS EC2, then how we will deploy our web application in AWS? And the answer to that is by using another AWS service called Amplify. So in your browser, just type AWS Amplify. Then it's loading now. So as you can see, on the first result, you will see AWS Amplify. So let's click this. So AWS Amplify is a complete solution that lets front-end web and mobile developer easily build, ship, and host full-stack application in AWS. Also, AWS Amplify is way cheaper to use compared to AWS EC2, especially if you will just going to use your EC2 instance just to host your web application. So now I'm going to show you a sample comparison, especially in the pricing in using AWS Amplify and AWS EC2. By the way, AWS Amplify by default has an instance size of 4 CPU and 7 GB of RAM. So if we will compare that to an AWS EC2 with that kind of instance, so let's go to AWS Pricing Calculator. So let's see, here I am on calculator.aws. We can use this to create an estimate. So let's create an estimate for AWS EC2 in a region of Singapore and operating system of Linux. So in the CPU, let's select 4, and in the memory, let's select 16, or maybe let's select 8. So 8. So this is the equivalent size of server instance in 8 of AWS Amplify. So the pricing for this one is, if you go to the bottom part, you will see that the total monthly cost as an estimate is around $60. So to be exact, it is 57.69 USD. So now if we will compare it to AWS Amplify with the same instance size, let's go to another pricing calculator. So this is the selected instance type is AWS Amplify. I am on the region of Singapore, and then here in AWS Amplify, you are only being billed by the number of minutes of your code being built, or the number of minutes it takes for application to be built or deploy. So for example, as an example, let's say your application is being built. Let's say you start yarn run build, and it takes 3 minutes to complete the yarn build. And let's say you are going to do that every hour to deploy your application. So let's put 3 minutes per build, and then you will build your application per hour. So that's what I put here. And then let's say the size of your project is around 15 gig, and then the data served per month is also, let's say, 15 gig. This is too much for I believe, especially if you're just going to deploy a simple web app. The calculation of that, the total monthly cost is just around $24 to $25 per month. So going back to AWS EC2, that's half of the cost. You save half of the cost on using AWS EC2. So that's why it is very suggested to use AWS Amplify instead in hosting your web app. So now, what I'm going to show you is how to use AWS Amplify. And it is, as I mentioned, way simpler to deploy your application because you don't need to install other tools or framework to run your application, especially if it's, for example, it is React web app. It is, AWS Amplify is smart enough to handle everything or to pre-install everything you need to run your application. So let's do a hands-on. So now I'm going to show you how to quickly and easily deploy a simple React app to AWS Amplify. So first, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to create simple React application. So let's start. So first, let's clear everything here. Type yarn create React app, and then the name of your application. So I'm just going to name it Amplify Hosted App. So press enter. So now I'm creating a React app. So as you can see, it failed because it seems that I already have one. So let's see. cd amplify hosted app. So I already have an application created by using yarn React app. Now I'm going to start it. Yarn start. So now, as you can see, this is a simple React web app. So the prerequisite before you can use AWS Amplify is either your app or project should be push or reside in a Git repository like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and also I believe they can handle like a drag and drop of your project, but it is suggested for you to push it first to a Git repository so you can utilize the automatic build and deploy of your application. So now for this one, I already pushed my application to my GitLab. So it depends on whatever Git repository you are using. If you are using GitHub, that should be fine, and the step should be the same. I'm here at the AWS Amplify. So let's create new app, and then I need to select host web app. And here, as I mentioned, you have this selection of your repository. So in my case, I'm going to select GitLab and then select continue. So now at first, if it's your first time to use Amplify, it will request for authorization of your GitLab before you can connect your repository to your AWS. In my case, I already done that. That's why it says GitLab authorization was successful. It should be easy. It's just a click of a button, so you don't have to worry for that. And then once your GitLab is successfully connected or your Git repository is successfully connected to your AWS, what you need to do now is select your branch or your project. And my project is this one, Amplify Hosted App. And then after selecting that, it will show another drop down which will ask you to select the branch that you want to use to build and deploy your project. In my case, I only have one branch which is main. So here, as you can see, there's a checkbox here asking if it's a monorepo, because if it's a monorepo, you need to define which folder of your project where the command needs to run. So in my case, it is not monorepo, so I'm going to leave it as untick. So let's click next. So I already click next, and as you will see, you can see the build setting here. So it already detects that my application is using Yarn, and it knows that, to build my project, it already says Yarn install as a pre-build, because that's how you download or all the needed modules of your project. And then to actually build your my project, I need to run yarn run build. So you can modify this by doing edit if, let's say, you have an existing application that needs other command to build. But in my case, this is already the command that I needed to deploy my build. So I'm just going to leave it as it is and then click save. So now, after you're done with this, there is this advanced setting wherein you can type your preferred build. So if you have a different Docker repository that you want to use, that's fine. But in my case, I will going to leave it as it is, because I don't need any special Docker image for my application to run. And then for environment variables, like if you are maintaining some variables in your .env, then you can define that here. In my case, I don't have any. And then also, let's say here, you can also define or override the package version of your package.json. Let's say uh, you're using nodejs, but instead of version 14, you want to use version 16. You can just change that, and then once the application run, it will override the version of your package.json by whatever you type here. So in my case, I'm just going to remove because I don't need, but it's up to you. It depends on what your project or what your application needs. But I'm just going to show you the possibility. And then let's press next. So now this is just a review of what is the setting of the build setting of my application. It says here the repository is GitLab, and as you can see here, in the framework, it was able to detect that my application is React. So that's how smart AWS Amplify is. So that's why the build setting, it is called Amplify specification. It detects the right command or the build command that I need. So I don't need to type any code for my application to build. Yeah, auto detect setting will be used. Environment variable is none. So okay, all looks good. Let's click save and deploy. So now it is saving the application, and after that, you will see this pipeline. It first provision your application, and then it will build, deploy, and verify. You can click this one to see the logs. This is the logs. It is downloading all the necessary settings that your application needs. So as you can see here, it says here that we are provision. It says here that you are using Docker image on a host with 4 CPU and 7 gig memory. So that's how powerful your server is when you use AWS Amplify with using cheaper costing. And then now it is build. It is cloning my repository. So I will post this video because it might take time, but I believe it should take like 1 to 3 minutes for this everything to finish. So I'm going to post the video and resume it once it's done. Okay, so the build is done and I have successfully built and deploy my application. So if we go to the build, you can see that the step is it clones the repository and then it checks if is there a backend that needs to be deployed. In my case, there's none. It's all front end. And then it runs the Amplify specification, the build settings that we indicate in the setup. And then it was able to successfully build my application. So now, to test the deployed application, what you just need to do is click this link. And there you go. Our application is now deployed in AWS Amplify, which is deployed in the cloud. And then that's it. You don't have to pay per hour to host this. You only pay per build. So that's how cheap this AWS Amplify is. And then let's say you want to change the domain to your preferred domain. There's a way here, like domain management. Just go here in the left panel, then click domain management, and then you can add domain. Also, another way is using load balancer. You can configure a load balancer and then define there. You can terminate HTTPS also there, so that's fine. That's another option. So there's a lot of way. And yep, that's it. That's how you deploy a simple web app or any web application to AWS Amplify. And I still recommend you should stop using AWS EC2 if you are just going to host web application because you are wasting money. Okay, so that's it for our video. So if you have any comments, question, feel free to comment. And that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.